Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our Fallbrook Climate Action Team meeting for February. We have a guest this evening from Power San Diego, and he'll tell you all about their effort to fire SDG&E and how maybe that might expand in the future if they're successful in San Diego. For those who haven't been with us before, we are a nonpartisan group of climate activists that have been putting on presentations, monthly presentations since 2015 in Fallbrook. First, we were live at the Fallbrook Library, and then when COVID happened, we started doing Zoom meetings, and we've kept doing Zoom meetings since. We don't have anybody specifically nailed down for next month, but we might have somebody from the CSA program here in Fallbrook to talk about community agricultural food boxes that you can buy directly from the farmers. And or we might have a FCAT in-person dinner party during the next couple of months. We've talked about doing that also, so we haven't decided on that for sure. So I'd like to welcome our guest this evening, Mark Hughes, who's a retired engineer, and he's the spokesperson for Power San Diego. So, Mark, go ahead and tell us about what your group is doing.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and share my presentation to get things rolling here. So, um, as Joyce said, I'm an engineer, a mechanical engineer. I spent my career in the power generation industry. I retired several years ago, but I do still provide consulting services to my former company, which was Solar Turbines. People are probably familiar with that down by the airport. And so I'm a volunteer, uh, going and making a lot of these presentations because I do know quite a bit about this industry, including I worked for an investor-owned utility in the past, Kansas City Power and Light. No need to guess where that was located. And so I want to jump right into it this evening and get us rolling here. And I need to get PowerPoint to pay attention. Okay, so what I find and I make these as I make these presentations is a difficult thing for people to get their minds around. And so I've taken to addressing this right off the bat. And what we know from our long human history is that for-profit companies in the competitive field are an excellent way of doing business. That competition, as we know, drives a lot of R&D. It gives us the highest quality for the lowest cost. We get good customer service, and everybody wins. Well, of course, except for those who don't compete well, right? But when we're talking about an electric utility, we're not talking about a competitive business environment. What happens to that great business model when we move into a monopoly? And in monopolies, if you remember your economics courses, there are natural monopolies. Water supply. We don't want multiple pipes coming to our house that we choose which one we want. Same with the sewer system, same with most roads, city streets, all that kind of stuff. And certainly it's the case with electricity. We don't want multiple wires coming to our house and us choosing which one we're going to use. But electricity, just like water and sewer and roads, are a basic need. There are two ways of making and distributing electricity. One of them is a for-profit business model. That's, of course, the investor-owned utility. And the other is not for profit, and that is co-ops and municipal and other governmental run not for profit utilities. And so, what we're going to look at tonight, and this is the part that's hard to get your mind around. Again, we're so used to saying, oh, well, automatically the for profit company is going to do a better job. And in the competitive arena, I think we've all would say, yes, that's true. But we're not in the competitive arena. We're in the monopolistic arena. So, how are we going to judge which of these two business models does the best job for us? Well, it seems pretty straightforward. Electricity is probably the most ubiquitous product there is in the world. There's no quality to electricity. All electrons are electrons. They're exactly the same. So, what it comes down to, there's really just two criteria. What price do we pay for our electricity? And what's the level of customer service that we're getting? Everything else, now, of course, dealing with climate change and all that kind of stuff, that's all important too, right? And I am fully behind that. But if the average person looking at their electricity, they only ask these two things. I want the best customer service at the lowest price, right? So the business model that delivers that is the one we should be using. Well, let's go look at how things have worked out. I'm going to go by residential electricity rates over the last 8 years, and I'm going to compare SDG&E to 5 of the largest municipal utilities in the state. Those being LADWP, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, City of Riverside, Imperial Irrigation District, and City of Anaheim. So, over the last 8 years, SDG&E's rates have gone up 168%. LADWP, their rates have gone up 44%. Sacramento's rates have gone up 38%. Riverside's have gone up 6.5%. And Imperial Irrigation District and City of Anaheim, no rate increase over the last 8 years. So that's pretty dramatic. But there are 46 municipal utilities in California, and there are 3 large investor-owned utilities. So let's look at all of those. And here they are. Now, this graph doesn't show all 46 of the municipal utilities because there just isn't space, of course, to make anything other than an eye chart. And even then, that's bad enough. But as you can see, and it is the case, all the municipal utilities on this chart have lower electricity price than the 3 investor-owned utilities, which are in blue, the municipal utilities in green. And I can tell you the other 46 utilities are all have lower rates than the one at the far right, which is City of Santa Clara. So this is the data. It's not our data. This happens to come from the Energy Information Agency, which is a part of the federal government that monitors this sort of thing. So in terms of price, the for-profit model is not delivering the lowest cost. But we're not done. We have 2 criteria. Let's go look at customer service. So this is J.D. Power in 2022. SDG&E has the lowest customer service rating in the West. third last in the nation. So there we are. There's our two data points. And this is data that nobody can argue with. This is just the price and the customer survey. So the for-profit model is not doing what we would expect in a competitive environment. So what's happening here? As we've just seen, the data, and anybody can go look this up. This is all public information. You can go to any of those utilities' websites. You can download their electricity tariffs, and you can verify everything that I'm showing you here. Or you can go to the EIA website that the government runs. The data clearly shows the public utilities have lower cost electricity and better customer service. SDG&E posted $1.4 million a day profit just within the city limits of San Diego last year. So that's about 500 million, a little over 500 million. Their profits for the entire territory were about $1 billion. So obviously that's part of the difference. I mean, you can have electricity with and without a side of profit. And of course, that's going to have an effect on the price you're paying for electricity. But the big difference in these rates that we're seeing and in the customer service ratings that we're seeing is the incentive structure difference between the two business models. And I want to illustrate that by having you imagine that you are going to go to 2 job interviews in one day. Your first job interview is to be CEO of SDG&E. And you walk into that boardroom and the chairperson of the board says to you, what is your number one priority in this position? If you don't answer that your number one priority is shareholder dividends, you don't get to hear question number 2. The long and the short of it is, when you're the CEO of a for-profit utility, the shareholders are your customers, not the ratepayers. The shareholders is who you're serving. So you come out of that meeting and you go to your next job interview, which happens to be at a not-for-profit electric utility. And you're asked the same question. What is your top priority in this position? And here, your answer had better be lowest cost electricity and highest customer service, or once again, you don't get to hear question number 2. This is what drives everything. It's the same position in an organization with completely different incentives. Your job is different depending on which one of these 2 models, businesses you're working for. And here's the final telling point that a lot of people don't know. We know, of course, that investor-owned utilities are overseen by a public utility commission. But I don't know that a lot of people realize public utilities are not overseen by the Public Utility Commission. That may sound incredible, but the reason is, if you're running a public not-for-profit utility, your customers are your ratepayers. This is a business model that inherently serves its ratepayers, and therefore it strives for lowest rates, highest customer service. So that pretty well tells the story of why we have the differences we do. And so how do we go about getting what people who live in areas that are served by municipal utility get? Here in San Diego, we can form our own poles and wires utility. Our plan is to buy the distribution level wiring system from SDG&E, not transmission. That's a whole different set of problems. But we want to buy the distribution level system. Our franchise agreement, the city's franchise agreement with SDG&E, allows us to do this at any time. When we do, and there are 3 studies that have been done by reputable companies over the last few years, they show that we will have roughly an immediate 20% reduction in our electricity bill, and that our savings would be, as shown here, about 20 billion over the next 20 years. Now, a lot of you probably know that U.S. World News and U.S. World News not long ago said San Diego was the most expensive country in the United States. And our electricity is a big part of that. SDG&E's electricity cost was, as of like 3 weeks ago, the highest in the nation. We're now in second place because PG&E leapfrogged over us. But SDG&E has already filed for rate increases of 10% next year and 10% the year after that. So we will likely be number 1 again. I would really like to switch and give that 20 billion to our children and grandchildren who follow after us. So everybody wants to know, what's it going to cost? So there's going to be negotiation, obviously, if we manage to get the vote on this. But the expectation of these 3 studies is roughly about $3.5 billion, which will be repaid over the next 30 years, and it will cost us roughly 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, if you remember back, SDG&E's current residential rate is about 45 cents per kilowatt hour. This is not going to happen if the vote goes our way in November. It's not going to happen for probably 3 or 4 years after that, which means our rates will be probably up in the 60 to 70% range. We'll get a 20% savings, so that'd be 12 cents off, let's say, our price per kilowatt hour, and then we'd have 3 cents coming back to pay that loan off. And that can be done. And why do we know it can be done? Because we have a great example of that here in our county, which is the Coronado Bridge. The Coronado Bridge was paid for with a municipal bond and by the people who crossed that bridge and paid that toll over the period of those 30 years. And then probably there's a lot of people in the audience here who remember that day when you crossed the bridge and suddenly you didn't get stopped at the toll booth any longer. And we haven't ever since then. It's because that bond got paid off. And it'd be the same thing here. We would pay 3 cents per kilowatt hour over the next 30 years, and then it would all be ours. So the point of the matter is, we can choose a different future, and that's what we're trying to do here. SDG&E's goal is to, of course, they have to transition to more and more renewable energy. And for them, the way to do that very, very profitably is to either build or contract with solar and wind facility hundreds of miles away and build transmission lines. And this is the projection of what the experts say will happen to our cost of electricity if we go down that road, and that's the red arrow. Our proposal is to build rooftop, commercial, and solar in the city, reduce the need for transmission lines, and because the price of solar panels is dropping as the years go on, electricity will get cheaper and cheaper rather than more and more expensive. So you're going to hear from SDG&E. In fact, they have already put $500,000 into a website and a political action committee opposing this. And mostly they're going to say it's expensive and it's risky. But is it? There are over 2,000 public utilities in this country, and they've been operating for as long, many of them, as long as there has been electricity, including LADWP that I mentioned, Sacramento, all those that were brought out before. In addition, 26 public utilities have been formed in the last 30 years, carved out of an investor-owned utility somewhere, and they're all still operating, and they all have cheaper prices than the utilities they came from. And lastly, I want to use an example from this state, which is the town of Merced, California. I imagine most people have heard of Merced. Well, in 1996, it broke away from PG&E, and it had a grand total of 3,200 customers. So you can imagine how much expertise there was in Merced regarding the operation and setting up of an electric utility. But they did. And today, they have over 13,000 customers because their electricity rates are significantly less than PG&E, and other towns in the area have joined them. And not only is their electricity cheaper than PG&E, it's also 100% green. So what this comes down to come back to our two business models, it's this incentive structure. If you change the job, if you change the requirements of the job, you change the results. And by that, again, if you're serving shareholders, you're using the ratepayers to do that. If your ratepayers are your customers, you're treating them as customers. The for-profit business model, they're going to respond to what their shareholders want. In other words, if you were to go to SDG&E and beg that CEO to please stop raising rates, and that person did that, they would be fired because that's not the job. You cannot ask them to do something other than what their job is. On the other hand, when you have a not-for-profit municipal utility and you don't like what's going on, you can exert political pressure, and it may not get results right away, but it's going to have an effect. You will never have an effect on a for-profit utility. And that is the end of my presentation. And I am happy to take questions at this point.
Are you planning to take all of SDG&E's territories? I mean, we are part of the unincorporated part of the county. So you're talking about the city of San Diego. Please don't leave us behind. Are you thinking about taking the, I mean, I lived in a place that used to have a public utility, and we paid 9 cents a kilowatt hour. 9 cents. I looked it up on the web, and that's what they are still charging. 9 cents. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, and yes, we had inexpensive hydroelectric power because we were up in the north. But are you thinking of taking basically all of San Diego County out of SDG&E?
At this point, no. And the reason being is that the entire county and all the cities here do not have the same franchise agreement, and sometimes no franchise agreement at all, I believe. And so we can only change what we can change, which is within the city limits. Now, the good side of all that is that even though we're talking a monopolistic environment, consider what happens if we get this done. All of a sudden, just like in the case with Merced, SDG&E runs the risk of a death spiral. In other words, other cities and the county joining, including the unincorporated, joining this, whatever we end up calling this municipal utility. And as such, SDG&E is going to find themselves between a rock and a hard place because, of course, they want to keep jacking rates up. But if they do, they are simply feeding into the motivation to join the municipal utility instead. And then the other part, a little bit further, a lot of people, and I get this question a lot. I've talked to people in the North County, I've talked to people in the East County, and this is understandably a concern. And their concern is, won't they be granted rate increases to make up for all the income that they're losing? Well, their income or their profit, let's say, is a percentage of their capital investment. When they sell that distribution system to us, a big part, about half of their capital investment in the county goes away. So they can no longer justify the income, the total income that they were getting in the past. It's going to be dropped about in half. And so as a result, you will not see any immediate effect on your rates. And of course, in theory, the CPUC is there to prevent them from doing that. We've all seen how effective or ineffective that oversight is. But anyway, long story short, my expectation, if we manage to get this done, and it's a big if, they can afford to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this campaign. And it would make financial sense for them to do that, given the billions of dollars that are at stake here. Because if they do lose, my prediction is within 10 years, SDG&E no longer has an electricity business. They'll be gas only, and gas only is dying too.
Question.
Just one little quick tiny follow-up. Have you investigated the franchise agreements in the unincorporated areas, because we aren't a separate city?
Yeah, no, I have not. I have not. There are people in our group that have, but I personally have not, so I can't speak to
it. Question. Will the new business contract for electricity directly? And would you pay a fee for transmission line to SDG&E? Or how does the billing work? And the other piece of it is that for the customer, I presume that there would be no SDG&E bill. There would only be a gas bill if they'll have gas.
Right. So there are two pieces to the electricity puzzle, if you want to say. There's the energy, and then there's the poles and wires. And so we're talking about just the poles and wires. And we have San Diego Community Power, who would provide the energy side of it. And so we would work hand in hand with them. Currently, here in the city and in some of the other cities around, you can choose to get your electricity from San Diego Community Power or from SDG&E, either way. And about 80% get their power from San Diego Community Power. It has more renewable content and it's slightly cheaper. As for electricity that comes in over SDG&E's transmission lines, yes, we would still pay, quote, a toll on those transmission lines. That's how they get paid for. If you look at your bill, you will see transmission charges, and it's on a per kW basis, per kilowatt hour basis. And so that would not change. But again, our goal is to build out solar panels within the city limits and slowly wean ourselves off the use of those transmission lines. We'll never completely go away from them. We will always need some power sloshing around the west. but we will reduce that as much as possible. And that's what that one graph showed, that one chart of the two arrows going in different directions. But that's a good question.
So what do we do to help you out?
So to be able, what we're doing right now is we're gathering 120,000 signatures to get this on the ballot for this coming fall. But to be able to sign our petition, you need to live within the city limits and be a registered voter. And I'm guessing, given the nature of this group, I'm thinking not very many people live in the city limits, and that's fine. We would definitely take volunteer help, phone banks, various odds. And we had a big press conference there today. I don't know if you heard the news about that. It was at Sempra's headquarters, out in front of their headquarters. And we need help gathering signatures. You can do that without being a resident of the city. If you go to our website, which is wearepowersandiego.com, you can see where we're going to be collecting signatures, and you can sign up to volunteer. You can donate. We're like any other nonprofit. Yes, thank you for putting the website up there. We're like any other nonprofit. We're operating on a shoestring and doing the best we can. And I can tell you, we haven't raised $500 million that SDG&E has thrown into the works right now.
I noticed you credit Powers Engineering as a major contributor. Is that Bill Powers' company?
Yes, it is. Yeah, Bill put in quite a bit of his own money to get this off and rolling. And the story behind that is, for people who don't know Bill, he has been testifying at the CPUC for more than 20 years. And, he looked back over just this last 8 years and that 168% increase. And he said, I've just wasted my time. He said, this is not working. This is never going to work. And so he started this effort. And it's heroic. I mean, he's putting in many, many hours every day, day in and day out, to try and get this to happen. And I've known him for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, something like that. And so he called me in very early on and asked me to help be part of it. Anybody have any concerns? Like I said, this usually really throws people off. We're so used to the for-profit business model being by far the best way to do things. And a lot of people that I have found have a hard time getting their heads around that. It doesn't seem right.
I do have a question. I was initially under the impression that Power San Diego would be purchasing all of the transmission facilities that would be in service. But now it sounds as though you'd still be needing SDG&E for transmission. What's to keep them from jacking up the prices on that?
Oh, they would try to do that. Yeah, here's the deal. If we are successful in our in our plan to build out rooftop commercial and industrial solar here in the city, and it's already been studied, and we can provide most of the electricity we need just in that way, they have no justification to build more transmission lines. It's kind of a catch-22 deal that, they're charged with moving to ever more renewable energy, which of course we all agree is a good thing, but it's a cash cow for them because they will contract or build these facilities literally hundreds, if not 1,000 miles away, and then say, hey, we got to build a transmission line to that. And that's billions and billions of dollars to do that. And that's their incentive. That's the business structure. That is what they are going to do. If they didn't do that, the CEO would be fired. Okay. And somebody has a question here about NEM 3.0, perfect timing. The reason that the utilities are pushing for net energy metering 3.0 is for the explicit purpose of killing rooftop commercial and industrial solar. It is a threat to their business model. The more solar we put in on our rooftops, the less justification they have for building a transmission line. They couched it in terms that the wealthy people were getting a break and the poor people were paying for all of this. But in truth, and there's an editorial in the San Diego Times that came out that Bill wrote just yesterday, and I encourage you to look this up, in which he exposes that for what it is. In the first year, the low-income customers would get a small break on electricity rates, but SDG&E's already filed requests for rate increases would wipe that out in the second year. So it's not about that at all. The reality of it is net energy metering 3.0 is their plan to kill rooftop solar. And from their business, it makes sense. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Last year, the PUC implemented a plan that changed the reimbursement for solar to make it much less feasible. And as I have read that solar companies are having a hard time surviving. So what is the solution for that? I believe there is actually a lawsuit to try to reverse that. Is that correct? Or
well, yes, and there's a number of state senators and congressmen that are attempting to override the CPUC, which of course, predictably, has gone along largely with what the three investor-owned utilities want. And so there's a lot going on there. But what's interesting is that, again, if we form a municipal utility, all of a sudden, we are no longer operating under CPUC guidelines, rules, anything. We can do our own thing, and our own thing will be to revert back to subsidizing and promoting rooftop commercial and industrial solar, because this will be the cheapest option, and because, again, we've changed that incentive structure. We're not trying to make a profit now. We're trying to serve ratepayers with lowest rates, highest customer service. And so everything changes. Yeah. Yeah. So Paul, are you gotta ask a question? I noticed you.
How many Pauls are here? Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I just saw you unmuted.
Oh, this is an ignorant question. I'm not sure how to couch it in industrial nomenclature, so I'll do my best. You were referring to something I've heard about before in the sense of clusters or grouping or microsystems that were of energy generation that was aimed at specific communities, let's say, just for the sake of argument. Especially in the case of an unincorporated area like here in Fallbrook, obviously that's not a large entity like it would be down in the incorporated cities. How do you see that being a possibility, and what moves would we need to make, or some kind of overture to those? I know you're looking at doing this down in San Diego City, but what can we do in the meantime in order to get the ball rolling on our part? Because I'm completely a newbie to this. I've had a solar system on top of my roof, which I'm getting angrier about by the day for the same reasons everybody else is. I use the term pissed off, sorry, but it's true. So I would like, for example, just a small thing perhaps, except that we have medical issues in our household, to be able to have power when there's an outage. And the only way we can do that is we have an expensive battery system, which we don't have at this point. So I think, a lot of us are wondering what to do. We're motivated, but we don't really have enough information, and we need a sense of direction, number one. And as a side question to that, I see that you're recording, and I was wondering if the recording is going to be available later, because I have neighbors that would love to see that.
The answer is yes. It will be available later, not immediately, but in a
Okay.
week or two, it'll be on our website, fallbrookclimateactionteam.org.
Okay,
When
thank
it's
you.
ready, we'll send out an email to all the attendees.
Great. That's my next question. Thank you so much for your time.
Right. Okay. So, Paul, what you're talking about is something called microgrids, which are areas that are wired together, which of course we're all wired together, but you separate them from other areas through what are called disconnects, something like that. And then you provide maybe a central storage battery, or it could be batteries at each individual home. It could be there's a whole lot of different ways you can do it. And people have solar panels or whatever to produce the electricity. And that way, during things like fires or things like that, where the transmission lines are, are shut down because of fire risk, you would still have power. That is definitely a strategy that I would recommend for the backcountry or the unincorporated areas, maybe even on a house-by-house basis. In fact, that's one of the sore spots over the last several years is after the fires, SDG&E proposed putting in metal poles, replacing all the wood poles with metal poles, which actually does nothing to prevent fires at all. And then they were putting in undergrounding. And of course, what this means is a lot of money, a lot of profit made. The alternative proposal was to give people in fire-prone areas home batteries, literally provide them and provide maintenance. And the cost would have been about 10% of the cost of the undergrounding and the metal poles that are going in. But you can imagine the profit would have been a lot less too. And so that didn't happen. That didn't even get a fair hearing at the CPUC because the fix was already in. I'll answer Joy's question here about renters. There's what will happen if we manage to get this municipal utility put together. There's going to be a board. In fact, you can go look at the initiative on our website and you can see how it will be set up and how it will be run on the top outlines and how board members will be chosen and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, a general manager will be hired. And we already know that a lot of very good general managers around the world and around the country are watching, because if we manage to get this done, they want to come here. We all know San Diego and its environments are a great place to live. And we would have no problem getting somebody very, very talented to come and get this thing off and rolling. That said, that's where a lot of the details, like what do we do with renters and all that kind of stuff, would get fleshed out. So we're not defining any of that at this point. Now, again, a good place to go look is at the municipals and see what they're doing, because again, they're serving their customers. And so if their renters are demanding treatment, some fair treatment with solar, then my guess is they're probably getting it. I haven't looked into that in detail. But again, their ratepayers are their customers. And when their customers ask for something, they're at least going to get a hearing. You're not going to get a hearing at SDG&E. Let me see, what else? Yeah, metal poles do not burn, but you're kind of late at that point. So the end result of it is, the metal poles don't reduce fires. That's the big piece. And So let's see, V2G, right. I agree with that. In fact, Bill Powers has a car that can both be charged from his house and can charge his house. He has a big array of, and he's still old school on this, but he has lead acid batteries. He is still connected to SDG&E, but he can disconnect and run indefinitely because he has solar panels, and now he has the car, which he calls his electron wagon. So he can go charge it somewhere else and bring it back and run the house if need be, if the batteries run down. And I look forward to the day when we all have that. My wife and I have electric cars as well, but we don't have the ability to recharge our house from our car. So anyway, that'll be a great addition once that's widely available. Other questions?
I'd like to make a couple comments. As far as the political way that we are with the county, instead of a city, we have the county. So the county has the capacity to do this as the same way that the city of San Diego can do it. But we don't need to have our own utility if this city utility gets off the ground. We can just join the county
Right.
of San Diego, which is all of unincorporated San Diego County, can just join that utility.
Yep.
That's just a political decision of our Board of Supervisors. So
Yeah, that's
those are
actually
the
right.
people.
Yeah.
Those
And you
are
could
Mhm.
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say those are the people that we would talk to, and maybe we would have to do the same kind of effort in terms of getting signatures. I'm not sure about that. The other thing that we have in Fallbrook, we actually have our own public utility for water and sewer. And they have the ability to do the same thing. They have the ability to take on other jobs, such as Wi-Fi or electricity, if they choose to do it.
And in fact,
And
that was the case in Merced, is they did have a water and sewer group, and that they just simply expanded it with the electricity. But yeah, I mean, if we manage to get this done, a lot of things are going to change. For example, as you pointed out, Joy, you might have to go gather signatures to get it on a ballot for the county. But my guess is you probably wouldn't have to. The reason we're having to do it right now is because SDG&E slash Sempra is the biggest political gorilla in this neighborhood. If you, as an elected official, go against SDG&E, you're writing your political death sentence. And we are doing this. In fact, I never was a big fan of the initiative system. I always thought, my feeling was, oh, come on, we're hiring these people to go and make our decisions for us. Just do it. But this instance is the best use, the most pure use of the initiative system. None of our elected officials are going to risk their political lives putting this on a ballot, which they could do. We don't need to go through all this signature gathering. They could just do that. But they're not going to do that. And so this gives us the chance to give them cover, to go out and gather these signatures and get it done when we're not going to get it done through our politicians because of the weight that SDG&E and Sempra throw around. And so I like that this initiative is exactly what it was intended to do.
Any other questions or comments?
One quick question.
Go ahead.
Are you seeking to put this on the ballot in November?
Yes.
Okay. What is the suspense for your signatures?
We're trying to get 120,000. We have to get 80,000. It's a percentage of the population. And we're trying to gather 50% more because we know that a lot of signatures are going to be thrown out. And so, yeah, that's the little molehill we have to climb right now.
What is the suspense for the signature turn-in?
It means, when does that period end?
Yes.
Middle of May.
Oh, okay. So that's the time
Yeah.
frame of coming up with the signature. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to
Yes.
establish.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate all the nice comments, and I really appreciate you having me on this evening. The more people that understand, the better chance we have.
Really great presentation, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody who wants to reach out, Joy has my email address. So if you do have follow-up questions that you want to ask, please go right ahead and do that.
Okay. Should we put your email up here just in case they
Yeah,
just want to?
I'll put it down right now.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We'll have another great presentation again next month, and look for a notice about a in-person party that we'll have in the next month or so, or two also. We can all get together in person.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.